In the year 476 AD, the greatest empire the world had ever seen finally collapsed. Cities burned, armies disappeared, and Rome, the ruler of the ancient world, fell into silence. But this is not the story of how Rome died. This is the story of how Rome was born. Long before emperors, before legions, before marble cities and mighty wars, there was only a wild river, dark forests, and a terrifying prophecy. A prophecy that said a kingdom would rise, and a king would be overthrown by his own blood. To stop that future, a cruel ruler ordered 2 newborn babies to be thrown into the river and left to die. No army protected them, no city welcomed them. Only fate did. Because those 2 abandoned children would one day give birth to a civilization that would rule 3 continents and shape the world for thousands of years. And their names were Romulus and Remus. But before Rome could rise, brother would be turned against brother, and the first stone of Rome would be laid in blood. Chapter 1. A land of tribes, gods, and prophecies. Before Rome ruled the world, before its armies marched across continents, before its laws shaped modern nations, Italy was not a land of great cities or mighty empires. It was a land of small tribes, scattered villages, and endless rivalries. People lived close to nature, surrounded by thick forests, dangerous animals, and unpredictable rivers. Survival itself was a daily battle. In this ancient world, strength meant everything. Strong tribes took land from weaker ones. Warriors became leaders, and every victory, every disaster, every strange natural event was believed to be the will of the gods. To these people, and the world was not controlled by chance, it was controlled by divine forces watching from above. Storms were messages, earthquakes were warnings, and victories in war were proof that the gods were pleased. Among all the rivers of Italy, one held special importance: the Tiber River. It flowed from the mountains down to the sea, cutting through the heart of the land. Villages grew along its banks because it provided water, trade routes, and natural protection. But the Tiber was also dangerous. In spring, it flooded without warning, swallowing fields and homes, reminding people that nature could both give life and take it away. To ancient tribes, such a river was not just water. It was sacred, and wherever people believed gods were present, stories and prophecies soon followed. And one of the most powerful beliefs of the time was that great cities were not built by ordinary men. They were founded by heroes chosen by destiny. Men who carried divine blood, guided by unseen hands toward a future they could not escape. This belief was not just spiritual, it was political. If a ruler could claim the gods supported him, his power became unquestionable. To oppose him would mean opposing fate itself. So legends were not just stories told around fires. They were tools of authority. And in the hills south of the Tiber River, one such legend was already taking shape. At this time, the most important city in the region was not Rome. Rome did not even exist yet. Instead, power belonged to an older city called Alba Longa, built on high ground and ruled by a royal bloodline that claimed descent from ancient heroes of Troy. And to the people of Italy, this connection meant everything, because Troy was not just a fallen city. It was a symbol of honor, courage, and divine destiny. Anyone who could trace their family back to Troy was seen as chosen by the gods themselves. And this royal family of Alba Longa believed that their future was protected by prophecy. But prophecy is a dangerous thing, because once people believe the future is written, fear begins to guide their actions. Kings become suspicious, brothers become enemies, and blood becomes a tool to stop destiny. In ancient Italy, politics was never clean. Power changed hands through betrayal, secret deals, and violence. There were no written laws strong enough to protect rulers from ambitious relatives. The only real protection was strength, and even that could fail. And so, And while villagers prayed to the gods for protection, powerful families fought quietly behind palace walls, planning how to secure their bloodline and destroy their rivals. It was in this violent and uncertain world that the story of Rome truly began. Not with armies, not with cities, but with a royal family consumed by fear. Because in Alba Longa, a prophecy had begun to spread. A prophecy that said the future king would not be born in the palace, but would rise from within the royal blood itself. And that prophecy would soon push one man to make a terrible decision. A decision that would send two innocent lives floating down a river toward destiny. Chapter 2. The royal bloodline that was meant to rule. The city of Alba Longa had stood on its hills for generations, protected by stone walls and ruled by an ancient royal family that claimed descent from the heroes of Troy. For the people, this bloodline was sacred. Kings were not just rulers. They were believed to be chosen by the gods themselves, but even divine blood could not protect a throne from human ambition. The rightful king of Alba Longa was a man named Numitor. By tradition, the throne should have passed peacefully from father to son, as it had for generations before him. But Numitor had a younger brother, and that brother wanted power more than honor. His name was Romulus. Unlike Numitor, who ruled with patience and respect for tradition, Romulus believed strength mattered more than destiny. He gathered supporters, bribed soldiers, and quietly prepared for betrayal. And one night, when Numitor least expected it, Romulus struck. So he overthrew his own brother. Numitor was not killed. That would have angered the gods and the people. Instead, Romulus removed him from power and forced him into quiet exile, stripping him of influence while keeping him alive as a reminder of who now ruled the city. But Romulus knew something dangerous remained. Numitor still had family, and family meant heirs. To secure his stolen throne, Romulus made a ruthless decision. He ordered that Numitor's sons be executed, cutting off the royal bloodline that could challenge him in the future. The order was carried out without mercy. But there was one more threat he could not ignore. Numitor's daughter, Rhea Silvia. If she were to marry and have children, those children would have the strongest possible claim to the throne. For Romulus, this was unacceptable. And so instead of killing her, which would again risk angering the gods, he chose a crueler solution. He forced Rhea Silvia to become a Vestal Virgin, a priestess sworn to serve the goddess Vesta and remain unmarried for life. Vestal virgins were forbidden from having children. Breaking this vow was considered a crime against the gods, punishable by death. To Romulus, this solved the problem. No marriage, no children, no future kings, or so he believed. But fate, as the ancients often said, does not respect human plans. Years passed, and Rhea Silvia lived in the temple, serving the goddess as she was commanded. But one night, according to legend, something impossible happened. She became pregnant. When the news spread, fear swept through the palace. For a Vestal Virgin, and pregnancy meant only one thing: divine intervention. Was scandal powerful enough to shake the city? Rhea Silvia claimed that the father of her unborn children was none other than Mars, the god of war himself. To the people, this was shocking. If true, the children would not only be royal by blood, they would be divine. To Romulus, this was a nightmare. If the people believed the gods had chosen these children, his rule would never be secure. Every soldier, every noble, every citizen could turn against him in the name of destiny. But again, Romulus hesitated to directly kill Rhea Silvia. Instead, he ordered her imprisoned and waited for the children to be born. When the twins finally arrived, Romulus made a choice that would haunt history forever. He ordered that the newborn babies be taken away and killed. No trials, no mercy. No witnesses, just silence. But the servant assigned to carry out the execution could not bring himself to murder two helpless infants. Instead of killing them, he placed them into a small basket and carried them to the banks of the Tiber River. The river was rising with floodwaters. Its currents were strong and dangerous. If the babies survived, it would be the will of the gods. If they drowned, no human hand would be blamed. And so, the basket was set upon the water, and fate was left to decide what Romulus could not. The river carried the twins away, drifting through reeds and mud, far from the walls of Alba Longa, toward a future no king could control. Chapter 3. The Abandoned Twins and the Wolf That Changed History. The basket moved slowly across the flooded waters of the Tiber River, spinning as the current pulled it downstream, and branches scraped against its sides. Mud and leaves filled the water around it. For two newborn babies, alone and defenseless, this river should have been a death sentence. But the river had other plans. As the waters slowly began to calm, the basket drifted toward the river bank, where the land rose slightly above the flood. There, among tall grass and twisted roots, the basket became trapped. The current could no longer pull it back into the river. The twins were alive, cold, hungry, crying, and completely alone. In the silence of the forest near the Palatine Hill, no human heard their voices. No mother came running. No soldiers searched the riverbanks. Instead, according to legend, the sound reached something far more unexpected: a she-wolf. In the ancient world, wolves were feared as hunters, symbols of danger and death. But in Roman legend, this wolf did not attack. She approached the crying infants, sniffed the basket, and instead of tearing it apart, she lay beside the children and allowed them to drink her milk. To later Romans, this moment became sacred. They believed the wolf was sent by the gods themselves, a guardian chosen to protect the future founders of Rome. Statues would later be built showing the wolf standing over the twins, a symbol of Rome's violent strength mixed with divine protection. But myth and reality often walk side by side, because while the wolf legend captured imagination, the true survival of the twins would soon depend on human kindness. Not far from where the basket had washed ashore lived a shepherd named Faustulus. One day, while checking his animals, he noticed something strange near the riverbank. A basket, and inside it, two living children. Faustulus immediately understood the danger. In those days, abandoned children often meant political trouble. Someone powerful had wanted these babies gone, and keeping them could cost him his life. But instead of walking away, Faustulus made a choice that would echo through history. He took the twins home. His wife, Acca Larentia, helped raise the boys as their own, hiding their royal origins and protecting them from the dangerous world beyond the hill. To the villagers, Romulus and Remus were simply the sons of shepherds. But even among common people, they were different. As the twins grew, their strength became impossible to ignore. They were taller, faster, and more fearless than other boys. They fought wild animals, led games, and soon began to lead other young men in battles against rival groups of shepherds and thieves. Wherever trouble appeared, Romulus and Remus were at the center of it, not because they searched for conflict, but because others naturally followed them. Leadership, it seemed, ran in their blood, but destiny had not finished revealing itself. During one clash with rival herders, Remus was captured and taken to Alba Longa as a prisoner. There, he was accused of disturbing the peace and brought before King Romulus himself. The king did not recognize him. To Romulus, Remus was just another troublemaker, unaware that the young man standing before him carried the very blood he had once tried to erase. Meanwhile, Faustulus realized the truth could no longer remain hidden, and he told Romulus the secret of their birth. That they were not ordinary shepherds, but the grandsons of the rightful king, Numitor. Everything suddenly made sense. The anger, the leadership, the strange way fate had always pulled them toward conflict. Romulus rushed to Alba Longa, where he and his supporters freed Remus and revealed the truth to Numitor. The old king, who had lived in quiet exile for years, finally learned that his grandsons had survived. And in that moment, the story of survival became a story of revenge. Together, the brothers and their followers attacked the palace. Amulius was overthrown, the same way he had taken the throne years earlier. But this time, no mercy followed. Amulius was killed, and Numitor was restored as king of Alba Longa. Justice had been served. The royal bloodline was alive again. But the twins did not stay. They had grown up among shepherds, not nobles. Alba Longa was their birthplace by blood, but not by loyalty. Their hearts belonged to the riverbanks and hills where they had been raised, and so they made a decision that would change history. They would not rule Alba Longa. They would build their own city on the very land where the river had spared their lives. Chapter 4. From shepherds to leaders of men, after overthrowing King Amulius and restoring their grandfather Numitor to the throne of Alba Longa, Romulus and Remus stood at a crossroads. They had achieved what most men could never imagine: revenge, justice, and royal recognition. They could have remained in the city, living as princes, protected by walls and soldiers. But they chose a different path. The twins returned to the hills and valleys near the Tiber River, to the land where they had grown up. To them, this place was more than wilderness. It was home. It was where fate had spared their lives, where they had learned to fight, to lead, and to survive. And now they believed it was where a new city should rise. Word of their victory spread quickly among the surrounding villages. Young men who had once followed them in small fights now saw them as heroes who had defeated a king. Farmers, shepherds, and even escaped slaves began to gather around them, hoping to be part of something greater than their quiet, dangerous lives. What began as a small group soon turned into a growing community. Romulus and Remus organized them, assigning tasks, settling disputes, and defending their territory against rival groups. And without crowns or palaces, the twins were already acting like rulers. But leadership, especially shared leadership, is never simple. Though united in purpose, the brothers were very different in personality. Romulus was bold, decisive, and ambitious. He spoke of walls, laws, and armies. He believed a city must be strong from the beginning, protected by power and clear authority. Remus, while just as brave, was more impulsive and skeptical. He questioned plans, mocked traditions, and cared less about symbols of power. To him, strength came from loyalty between people, not from stones and titles. At first, these differences seemed harmless, but as the settlement grew, so did the need for structure. Where would the city be built? Which hill would protect it best? Who would command the people? In ancient times, such decisions were not made by logic alone. The gods were always consulted. And so, the brothers agreed to seek divine guidance. Each chose a hill from which to observe signs from the heavens, especially the flight of birds, which Romans believed revealed the will of the gods. Romulus climbed the Palatine Hill, close to the river, in the land where they had been found as infants. Remus chose the Aventine Hill, slightly farther away, overlooking open land. They waited. Hours passed in silence as followers gathered below, watching both hills, waiting for a sign that would decide the future of their city. According to legend, Remus was the first to see birds, 6 vultures circling above his hill. His supporters shouted in celebration. To them, this meant the gods favored Remus. But soon after, Romulus claimed to see 12 vultures above the Palatine Hill, twice the number. Now confusion spread through the crowd. Who was truly chosen? The one who saw the sign first, or the one who saw more signs? The gods had spoken, but they had not spoken clearly. And where divine certainty ends, human pride begins. Each brother believed destiny favored him. Each had followers ready to defend his claim, and the friendly rivalry that once existed between Romulus and Remus began to harden into something more dangerous. Still, Romulus moved forward. Believing himself chosen, he began marking the boundaries of the new city on the Palatine Hill. With a plow, he carved a sacred line in the soil, declaring it the future wall of Rome, a boundary that no one was allowed to cross in disrespect. This act was more than construction, and it was a declaration of authority. To Romulus, the city already existed in spirit, even before the first stone was laid. But to Remus, this was an insult. He saw his brother acting alone, deciding the future without agreement, without compromise. And in anger, he mocked the low walls being marked in the dirt, claiming that no real city could be protected by such weak defenses. What happened next would echo through Roman history forever. Because in that moment, the argument was no longer about birds or hills or boundaries. It was about pride, about leadership, about which brother would rule, and the crowd watching from below could feel it. Something was about to break. Chapter 5. The decision that created Rome. The sacred boundary drawn by Romulus on the Palatine Hill was more than a simple mark in the dirt. To ancient people, such lines were holy. They represented the protection of the gods, the heart of the future city, and the authority of the one who drew them. By marking those borders without his brother's approval, Romulus had made a powerful statement. This city would rise under his command. For Remus, that decision felt like betrayal. He had fought beside his brother, risked his life, helped overthrow a king, and now he watched as Romulus acted as if the future belonged to him alone. To Remus, the so-called signs from the gods were unclear, open to interpretation, and Romulus's confidence felt less like destiny and more like ambition. Tension spread through the camp. Supporters quietly chose sides. Some followed Romulus, believing strong leadership was necessary to protect the settlement from enemies. Others stood with Remus, who they saw as fearless and closer to the people. The twins, once inseparable, now stood surrounded by rival followers, and still no one imagined how far the conflict would go. Then Remus did something that, in Roman tradition, would be remembered as the ultimate insult. He stepped over the boundary. He jumped across the sacred line that Romulus had drawn, mocking the idea that such a small wall could protect a city. Some versions of the legend say he laughed. Others say he challenged Romulus openly, daring him to defend his claim. To the crowd, this was shocking. Crossing a sacred boundary was not just disrespect toward a brother. It was defiance against the gods themselves, and to Romulus, it was unforgivable. In that moment, the argument ended, and fate took over. But the exact details of what happened next would be debated for centuries. Some Roman writers claimed Romulus himself struck the fatal blow. Others said one of his followers attacked Remus while defending their leader. But all versions of the story agree on one thing. Remus fell. The man who had survived a river, a wolf, and a king's death sentence was killed not by enemies, but by those standing beside his own brother. Silence followed. No cheers, no celebration, only shock. The dream of founding a city had suddenly become a nightmare. Romulus stood over the body of his twin, realizing that the future he believed was destined by the gods had demanded a terrible price. The very first act in the history of Rome was not cooperation or peace. It was bloodshed. According to legend, Aunt Romulus spoke words that would define Roman identity for generations. So perish whoever else shall leap over my walls. It was a warning. Rome would be protected by law, by force, and by unbreakable boundaries. Anyone who threatened it, even family, would face destruction. With Remus gone, no rival remained. Romulus became the sole leader of the settlement. The people, stunned but fearful of chaos, accepted his authority, and the city took its name from him. Rome, the city of Romulus. Construction began immediately. Walls were raised, houses were built, temples were planned to honor the gods who had guided their destiny. Romulus organized the people into groups, appointed leaders, and began shaping the structure of a new society. But Rome was still small, vulnerable, surrounded by enemies. To survive, it would need more than walls and laws. It would need people. And that problem would soon lead Rome into its first wars, its first alliances, and its first expansion. Yet beneath all future victories, one truth would remain buried at the foundation of the city. Rome was born from conflict, from ambition, from rivalry, and from the death of a brother. The empire that would one day rule the world began not with unity, but with a tragedy that could never be undone. Chapter 6. When brotherhood turns into rivalry. With Remus gone, Romulus stood alone as the undisputed leader of the newborn city. The people who remained gathered around him, not out of celebration, but out of fear and uncertainty. They had followed the twins believing they were building a future together. Now that future belonged to only one man. And Romulus understood something important in that moment. Power taken by blood must be secured by strength. He moved quickly to turn tragedy into authority. He ordered proper burial rites for Remus, honoring him as a fallen hero rather than a rival. This act served two purposes. It showed respect to his brother, and it reminded the people that even kings were subject to fate and sacrifice. Then Romulus focused on survival. Rome was still just a fragile settlement of huts surrounded by hostile tribes. Without strong defenses and loyal citizens, it could easily be wiped out before it ever became a city. So Romulus began organizing his people. He divided them into military units, trained them to fight together, and appointed trusted men as commanders. He created early councils to advise him, setting the foundations of leadership that would later evolve into Roman political institutions. But Rome had another problem. It lacked population. Most of the followers who had joined Romulus were men, warriors, shepherds, and outcasts drawn by opportunity and protection. Without families, without children, Rome had no future beyond a single generation. Romulus needed to solve this problem quickly, and his solution would become one of the most controversial episodes in Roman legend. According to tradition, Romulus invited neighboring tribes to a great festival, promising games, feasting, and peaceful celebration. Families came with their daughters, believing they were entering friendly territory. But during the festival, Roman men seized the women and forced them to become wives. As this event became known as the rape of the Sabine women. Not a crime of passion, but a calculated political strategy to secure Rome's survival. Outrage followed. Fathers and brothers declared war. Armies gathered. Rome, barely born, was suddenly facing destruction from all sides, and once again, blood would be spilled to protect the city. But something unexpected happened. As battles raged, the women themselves stepped between the armies. Now, wives of Romans and daughters of enemy tribes, they refused to watch their fathers and husbands kill each other. Their pleas stopped the fighting and forced both sides into peace. Through marriage and alliance, Rome survived its first great crisis. But survival had come at terrible moral cost. And this pattern would repeat throughout Roman history. Victory through violence. Peace through fear, a unity through force. Romulus ruled for many years after that. He expanded Rome's territory, strengthened its army, and turned a fragile settlement into a rising power among the tribes of Italy. Yet legends say his rule ended as mysteriously as his rise. Some claimed he was taken by the gods in a sudden storm. Others believed he was murdered by his own nobles who feared his growing power. The truth was never known. But by then, Rome no longer depended on one man. The city had learned how to survive in a brutal world, and it would keep growing, through kings, through wars, and through constant struggle for power, because the blood that stained Rome's foundation did not disappear. It became part of its identity. And in the next chapter of Roman history, that identity would be tested again, this time not between brothers, but between kings and citizens. Because after Romulus, Rome would be ruled by a line of kings. Some builders, some tyrants, and one whose cruelty would finally push the people to rise up and destroy monarchy forever. In the next episode, we'll uncover how Rome was ruled by kings, how power slowly turned into oppression, and how one act of cruelty changed Roman history forever. Romulus versus Remus was only the beginning. The real struggle for Rome was about to begin. If you want to continue this story and see how Rome destroyed its own monarchy, subscribe now and join me in the next episode. Because the fall of kings is what truly turned Rome into a republic.